Hello, I'm Joan Mansson of Mansson Fine Art. Thank you for joining me for part 3 of the tutorial on building this beautiful macaw. If you'd like to see more of my work, please click on the subscribe and the bell button so you'll be notified when I have a new video. And if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. This is the end result of my 3-part series, and this is the photograph that I worked from, which came from Wildlife Reference Photos. I'm using a white pencil to add highlighting. What I'll be doing here is using blue and yellow and white and black back and forth and a baton blender to bring in better detail, very subtle detail on these yellow fluffy feathers. Now I'm working with the blue on the blue feathers. I use a pheasant blue, and I use turquoise and indigo and white to work on the blue feathers. I'm interested in, again, a subtle contrast so that you can tell that, or have the idea that there are individual feathers resting on the bird's head. The little yellow I'm adding is marigold, and I'm bringing in the yellow onto the blue. And my pencil is going in the direction of the feathers. Just as when you draw a dog or a cat or some other furry animal and you want the pencil to go in the direction of the fur, the same is to be done with the feathers. Now I use Derwent pencils, pastel pencils. You can use whatever you like best. When you are working with pencils, whether they're color pencils or pastel pencils, over pan pastels, you must bear in mind that you don't want to put too many layers of the pan pastel on your paper. It's better to use a sanded paper like a Pastelmat or a Sennelier's sand cardstock or one of the other sanded papers that are available, because you'll be able to lay more layers down, put down more layers of the pastel. But if you put too many layers of that pastel, if you're going for too much detail before you get to the pencils, then the pencils are going to create furrows and streaks instead of pencil marks, instead of color. I recommend, if you're not used to doing this, that you just get a piece of scrap paper and practice so you can see how hard or light your hand is. I happen to have a heavier hand, and I'll put down fewer layers because I do tend to get more on the paper the first time around. I tend to work back and forth in terms of light and dark. Right now I'm adding the peacock blue for the darker areas of the shadows, and then I'm adding white and I add the light blue. So I'm trying to build a contrast with the pencils going back and forth. If I see an area that I think needs more highlight, I add more highlight. If I think the area needs more shadow, I add more shadow. It's it's really completely intuitive. And learning how to do it comes as much with practice as with instruction. So, as they say with writers, if you want to write, write. If you want to draw, draw. If you want to paint, paint. Make mistakes. It doesn't matter, because you'll learn from your mistakes and you'll see what works, which is more important than seeing what you've done wrong, is understanding and seeing what you've done right and duplicating the procedure that you used to do that thing that was right. Now we're in the green area, and I use an olive green and leaf green and lime green, and doing the same thing, going back and forth, seeing where I need a little more shadow and where I need a little more light, where I need greater definition between the feathers and a sense that there's an overlapping. And that sense of overlapping happens best with the lightest of the colors, letting it come over the edge of the other colors, the darker colors, and those next to it. I'm just bringing in the indigo to add those darker feathers right around the edge of the crown. And when you're looking at a reference photo of a bird or a mammal, and the hairs or the feathers are perfectly smooth, that's when you go in and you add an errant feather. That little piece of feather or fur that comes off the body in just that time makes your piece that much more real. I think we relate better to the scruffy little dog than to the properly manicured dog. Not that they're not both beautiful, but somehow that scruffy little dog on paper looks a little bit more real. And working on the feathers of the body, using the indigo and black back and forth to add contrast between and distance between the feathers. For the most part, I will be working feather by feather. I'm still in time lapse here. I have it set at double time. And I'm using a blending stump to bring down the black and the indigo from the pencil onto the feather, creating variation in the shadow from dark to light. And when you're using a blending stump and you've gotten that nice black on from your blending the black that you have. You can use it additionally to add more shading to your drawing. It makes a wonderful additional tool. We have a shoulder coming out in front of the head, and I'm adding more black there because I want it to be evident. There'll be more blue just over that black, but I want it to be evident that there's a rise and a distance, and that the feathers are coming out, not laying flat. Using a tutorion, which is a hollow blending stump, because it's got a sharper point, I can blend in some finer areas. And now adding white streaks, short white streaks in the direction of the feather. I have glycine under my hand, which I failed to mention earlier, and that's to protect the pastel from smearing. I don't want the pan pastels and the pencils don't smear that much, but they do enough so I don't want to carry the color from one area of the bird to another. So I'm resting, and I do rest my hand. So I have it on the glycine. If you buy Pastelmat paper, it comes with a sheet of glycine between each of the sheets of the paper, and they last a long time. I lose these pieces of paper before I ever wear them out. You can also use a paper towel or wax paper. Using the white pencil to create highlights. For the body's feathers, I use a bright blue and a turquoise. I use green to blend in there, just in small areas. And I use white, and I use indigo. And I use a pale blue or a sky blue. Of course, you'll determine what colors you're using based on the pencils you're using. And through experience, if you haven't done this a lot, looking at the reference photo, you'll look at your pencils and you'll say, oh yes, this is right. No, this isn't right. You'll move back and forth. You'll try them. You don't like them. You'll rub them out and you'll cover them up with another color. It's trial and error. I am fortunate that most of the time I'm picking the right colors, but we're talking about over 50 years experience. So picking out colors from crayons when I was a kid to paints and pencils and pastels. And this is also something you can do with Photoshop. You can scan your photo in and put the little dipper down on a particular color, and it will bring up colors for you, and you can more easily select the right pencil to go with the dot of color that's appearing on your screen. But I like to look at the image and see the colors, look for a hint of green or yellow within the blue, or a hint of blue within the green. The pink face that I had always thought was pure white, and may well be pure white, but now I will always see it as being pale pink. And again, I'm just working back and forth with the indigo and the blues and the whites, building up shadow and contrast, adding light, building in fine details on the feathers, working essentially one feather at a time. There are areas like this one where there are cross lines on the feathers, and I'm using a darker blue to bring those in. Always taking a closer look at my shots. Was that marking really there? And it is individual markings that you'll see on the feathers that'll add to more interest in your work. Sometimes it's just the result of a shadow, other times it's an actual marking on the bird. But if you like it there, include it. If you don't like it, you're the artist. Ignore it. As you can see, the markings in this feather, I'm adding a light blue and moving in the direction of the feather. But those markings create a distinctive look and a point of interest. And it's not just the quill, the hairs or the filaments of the feather coming down from the quill. There are individual interesting markings going on as well as the highlighting. And I'm using the darker, richer blue to create the darker aspects of the feathers. And the blue-green, the turquoise. And I'm bringing in the light blue for highlight. And now I'm adding in the red background. This is like something that I do with watercolors. I just add a color or a set of colors in the background rather than completing a realistic background. And this is the red from Pan Pastel. And I'm using a triangular sponge, which has a lovely sweeping motion. And I'm not going to cover the entire background, just part around the head. It's complementary to the blue, but is in contrast to the green, so that there's a subtle popping going on. Making sure I bring it back inside the mouth so that it doesn't look weird as well in a little bit. And I want to bring it all the way up to the beak. So handy to be able to turn your paper around so that you can get at these very odd angles. Okay, and now my work is complete. I hope you've enjoyed sharing this with me. And if you do want to see more of my videos, please click on subscribe. If you like this one, please give me a thumbs up. Thank you once again for joining me. I'm Joan Mansson of Mansson Fine Art.